I have a confession to make. I've never seen Michael Jordan play during his time with the Bulls. If you've done just a little research on my content, you'll find out rather quickly that I think he is the GOAT. Should this disqualify me from even talking about this subject? Does this mean that my GOAT has to be LeBron James? No. We don't have to go that far. I mean, come on. The easy and boring answer is yes. Of course he can be your GOAT. George McCloud can be your GOAT, for all I care. You have free will, this is all subjective, blah, 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 blah. There's a lot more to this than that. That's especially the case if you want to be an analyst, content creator, writer, or if you just want to have a serious debate about your all-time greatest players rather than your casual barbershop talk. You want to add credibility to your list. And there are many ways you can obtain that, other than just your age and experience. There is a well-respected journalist who has come to the defense of people like you and me. That person is Bob Ryan. He is an award-winning columnist, and he wrote for the Boston Globe for decades. The dude has been around the NBA since the 60s. He wrote this article for Boston.com in 2008, and he said something that resonates with me deeply. He wrote this: I tend to forgive him. He doesn't say who that is, but it's Bill Simmons. On the basis of him not being there. But that would mean that history requires that you had to be there. I wasn't present for the Gettysburg Address or the Bobby Thompson home run. But that doesn't mean I can't have a good idea of what it must have been like to be there. That's what being a historian entails. You do your homework. And there you have it. The basis that someone can have a respected opinion about a player and his legacy because you weren't there to witness it is completely flawed. We've all learned about important world events from people who weren't alive during those times. We all need to question our history teacher and say,
Hey, you weren't there during the Revolutionary War. You don't know what you're talking about.
We trusted them because they did their homework, as Bob Ryan said. They studied these subjects for years, and they became qualified to teach about it. The same goes for 99% of the sports analysts in all the major sports platforms who speak on players that they've never seen before, like Bill Russell and Will Chamberlain. If you've done adequate research, you can have a pretty good idea of what it was like witnessing them play. You can speak on players that you've never seen before, but it's going to require some legwork. You have to do your research. Basketball Reference is a very useful tool. It's one that I use nearly on a daily basis. We all know how great it is. But please, don't just use that to judge the players. It gives you very little context on the numbers. It doesn't say what circumstances they had to overcome, there were sacrifices they had to make to integrate the talent that was surrounding them, things of that nature. To obtain that information, you have to read the sports articles that were written during that time. They're all online. If you are a certain age, you know how important the sports page was. That was the primary way people consumed sports content, even before cable TV became prominent. Because unless you lived in Chicago, there is no way you can watch all the games Michael Jordan played. Thankfully, those good people have made a lot of those games available to watch on YouTube. I mean, we're talking about hundreds of games that we can watch, whether it's their highlights or the full games. There isn't any excuse to say now that you haven't seen Jordan play unless you simply don't want to. And that's another thing. Don't watch the game with a bias. The way the game was played in the 2000s, 90s, 80s, and beyond was much different. Keep in mind that there are certain unwritten rules that prevented players from showcasing their talents. Dunking was frowned upon at one point. Isaiah Thomas said one time that dribbling between your legs and showing off your ball handling skills could lead you to getting clotheslined. That's why loving the history of the game is so important. Because the more you know, the more you're able to travel back in time and really appreciate what you're watching. You're not going to judge the players and say, hey, where's all the step back threes? There's no spacing. The style of play that is prominent today would lead you to the back of the bench in any other era. They had to play a different way. Appreciate the skills that the players had that allowed them to excel for their era. You'll have a much better time watching some of the game's most legendary players. Even when watching the games for yourself, it's very important to realize that it's not the same as watching it in real time. You're simply not getting the full experience. So we have to humble ourselves and listen to what the old heads have to say about how good these players were. Do all of them know what they're talking about? Of course not. But if the consensus is saying, this player was great, don't question it. It's like when the younger generation says that Allen Iverson is overrated, he wasn't that great of a player, look at his field goal percentage. If you were there to witness him, you'd be picturing slapping this person in the face. If 9 of the 10 people who were old enough to watch AI play say that he was worth all the hype, again, don't question it. Listen, my generation isn't any better. If you're questioning what 99.9% of the people who was there to watch Larry Bird, and he said that he was a basketball god, just don't. They all can't be wrong. And maybe you're the one that's missing something. I've personally had to do that with Wes Unseld. The stats say that he was an ordinary player, but everyone from his era kept saying that he was an all-time great. I knew I was missing something. So after hours of research and watching the games, I finally got it. They were right. The way he impacted the Baltimore Bullets and Larry the Washington Bullets can't be overstated. And the old heads helped open my eyes and see things in the right perspective. So as far as for me, as a content creator, as someone who routinely makes videos about Michael Jordan and who's the GOAT, I've done all these things. Because before I wanted to become a YouTuber, I wanted to be a writer. I wanted to write an informative and detailed book about the greatest players and teams. Because I knew if I wanted people not to just buy the book, but love it, I needed to do a ton of research. I needed to watch a ton of game film. After years of doing that, I felt like I could say that I knew what I was talking about, that people could trust my perspective. So I wrote the all-time greatest NBA book, counting down the top 50 teams, playoff runs, playoff moments, and the 100 greatest players. This project helped me tremendously in this next stage that I'm in. So even though I was too young to remember watching Michael Jordan play, I can confidently say that I can still give an informed opinion about him and where he should land among the all-time greats. As could anyone else, if you're willing to do the work.